year was 2015. It was a cool, crisp night. Clear skies, full moon. Two men were sitting in a car, beams on high, spotlighting an official-looking sign mounted on an official-looking fence, one that read, "Admittance prohibited by the DRO." The men were named Oregon Cray and Manny Cortez. Previously, they had both been wet work, black ops soldiers, mercenaries who took the jobs the U.S. military was forbidden to take. Now, they were soldiers of fortune, trying to do less violent work, and with greater purpose. They had come to learn over the last few years that working for your conscience paid a great deal less than the other kind of work. With that in mind, they were here in this deserted place on this dark night to talk to a woman about a job. This wasn't the sort of call that they would have fielded ordinarily, but times were tight. And this woman claimed to represent one of the richest women in the world, Lila Ambrose. Yep. That Lila Ambrose. The humanitarian, the fashion designer extraordinaire, the champion for the rights of women and children all across the world. For some reason, Lila Ambrose had a head of security, and for some reason that head of security wanted to meet with Cortez and Cray in this remote part of northeast Ohio. And so here they sat, the car idling, as they stared at that sign. Just past the fence, they could see a little compound of well-worn buildings and shacks placed around a sand parking lot that was littered with holes. Oregon Cray asked his partner, "You're sure this is the place?" Manny nodded, and he looked at his watch. "Right place, right time. Tell me again what she said on the phone." Manny rolled his eyes. "Again with this? Okay. As you know, because we've gone over it, she said no killing, nothing heavy. Security work, possibly some head breaking, but nothing heavy. Her words, bro." Oregon pointed at the sign. "This place is under the watch of the DRO. That sounds heavy." Manny drummed his fingers against the wheel. He kicked it around upstairs and then said, "Hey, you know what? You're right. Like, personally, I don't have a bad feeling, but it does kind of seem like a red flag right out of the gate, so maybe we should just..." Oregon silenced him by holding up a finger, and he pointed. Manny looked through the windshield. He saw a petite woman standing in front of the gate. She waved to them, then raised the edge of her jacket to show the sidearm on her waist. They got out of the car. The woman walked over to Oregon and stuck out her hand. "You're Oregon Cray. I've heard about you." They shook hands. She was staring at him, genuflecting like he was some kind of rock star. And then she shook her head and rolled her eyes, almost like she was laughing at herself internally. "And you must be Manuel." She walked over and shook Manny's hand. "I'm Sadie. We spoke on the phone." Manny said, "Hi, Sadie. Listen, we're taking a flyer on being here. You were super vague on details." "Well, that's the way Miss Ambrose and I like to do it. Phones are, well, you know. I prefer things face to face, so I know who I'm dealing with. And just so you know, you aren't taking a flyer on this job. As soon as you pulled up, I authorized payment." Cortez and Cray looked at each other. It all felt on the up and up so far. "Okay, so what's the job?" "Underground. There's a cult. Not a culty cult with robes and daggers and whatnot. It's more a collection of outcasts and high school dropouts that sort of ended up here. I need them all removed. I need it done without violence. But there's more to it. Before we go down, I have to tell you the story of what happened here a few years ago. Have you ever heard of Bob Billings? This has a lot to do with what he did. They called him the Trapdoor Spider. Drinking whiskey in the kitchen and telling scary stories around the fire. Music, monsters, and mayhem. Killers, cannibals, and cults. Fearful fiction and furious fact. Tall tales and terrifying truths. This is a scary home companion. Sadie finished her tale. She spared no grisly detail, nor the educated speculation on the supernatural events that had accompanied the carnage. It was all done for these things called the ghastly ones. Have you ever heard of the ghastly ones? She patted her pockets as if looking for smokes. They get into your head through your dreams. But in cases like the Trapdoor Spider, they can come over here physically, very briefly. It's called a breach when that happens. Bob Billings spent years building this razor wire web in the cavern. He blooded it. He sacrificed animals and then people. But it wasn't until everything went way over the top and all those first responders died at once, that's when the breach opened. It's very difficult to do. But after that first time, a breach opens up a whole lot easier. So, when I say there is a collection of people down below that are prone to bad decisions, what I mean is that these people could open up that breach, even if they're not meaning to. And if they are meaning to, it would be pretty damn easy. Blood, violence, suffering, any of that could open the breach on our side. And then the nightmare people can just walk through. She led them through the fence. They wound their way through the large patch of sand littered with gaping trapdoors. Regardless of what we see or hear down there, the goal is to get everyone evacuated with no violence. And that's it? Cray asked. That's it? What's the catch? Well, that whole long story about the demons and the breach, that was the catch. This is not standard security work. She looked at them, appraising them, a bit surprised at how nonplussed they both were about the mission specs. Also, there's the profane botany. So you should wear these. She handed out surgical masks before slipping one on herself. They went through 2 sets of doors, down a ladder, and into a well-worn path through a series of steep caves that dove to the base of a massive crevice. With every passing step, the atmosphere seemed to change. The air was thicker, clammy, cold, dank. After some travel, the walls were no longer beaded with dark moisture. They were dry, cracked, and crusty. Manny stopped to study the wall. Sadie cautioned him, "I wouldn't touch that, even with gloves." "Bro, is this a scab? The wall's a big scab. Holy shit. All the walls are covered in scabs. I don't like scabs, Hefe. They ick me out." "Ick you out? Manny, you have 29 confirmed combat kills. What the fuck do you mean, ick you out?" "I know. Scabs? Shit is repulsive." The narrow cave opened up before them, and the floor leveled off beneath them. "Okay, game face, brother." Cray clapped Cortez on the shoulder. Sadie paused, taking in the room, and she wavered on her feet just for a moment. "Are you okay, Hefe?" Manny asked. "It's this place," she said. "You can feel it, can't you?" They were silent behind their pale blue masks, but they could feel it. It wasn't a sound per se, more like a white noise resonating in the marrow of their bones, filling them up, making them throb with a pulse that was not their own. Before them, the cavern spread out for 100 visible yards, and who knows how much further it went into the darkness. There were some 24 people there, spread out into groups and pockets and clusters and cliques, and they all turned to stare at the newcomers. The newcomers, for their part, were staring up and around this massive place, stunned, speechless at the nest of infernal life. The vast expanse overhead was crisscrossed with a dense web of gnarly maroon vines. These vines would have looked just like freshly plucked veins, pulled from living tissue and stretched taut, except for all those thorns. Short and sharp, they made the vines look like barbed wire. At every intersection in the web where vine met vine, a little sac had started to grow. Long, thin needles dangled from these flesh-like sacs, limp but wickedly sharp, and swaying in some unfelt breeze. The scab-like growths covered every surface down here, and in some places the scab was especially thick. It almost seemed to be growing in patterns and shapes and pictures. The denizens of the cave were still staring at them, with only one among them seeming troubled by their presence. The others were drinking, or getting high, or reading, or praying, or muttering to themselves, or some combination therein. But they were visitors in this arcane church, so they didn't mind other visitors. But the one guy, A middle-aged slab of beef with neck tattoos. He knew they were out of place. He started whispering to the others, pointing at Sadie and the boys. "Okay, you're up," Sadie said. She still felt a little woozy, but she had known ahead of time that she was going to feel this way. That's why these two were so important right now. Well, that and the other reason, of course. But that wouldn't come until later. Manny took off his jacket and his side holster and tossed them to Cray. He was wearing a muscle shirt underneath, and now he was unarmed. "What's he doing?" Sadie asked Oregon. "Manny's good with the gun, but he is an ace with his mouth." "You don't say." Oregon nodded. "I do. Double or nothing that he talks all of them out of here without us lifting a finger." "What about that big guy? He's eyeballing us." "That guy? He'll be the first in line. I bet he even offers Manny some drugs." Manny cleared his throat and ambled lazily towards the other people in the cavern. Yo, check it out. Chill, it's cool. My name is Manny. All right, I need you to give me like 10 seconds because this is something you need to hear." Sadie turned to Oregon. "Okay, you're on." They shook on it. There had been 29 people in the lair of the Trapdoor Spider. Now all 29 were clustered under the moonlight. The distrustful guy who called himself Bobby was trying to get Manny to smoke a joint with him. Sadie shook her head. "Well, I'll be damned." Oregon chuckled behind his mask. "I know. I still don't understand how he talked me into being partners." Sadie went over and whispered into Manny's ear. He nodded. "Okay, so the cops are coming. And it's feds too, so y'all gotta go post haste, okay? Not you, Bobby. I need your help with something real quick." The crowd began to disperse in ones and twos, disappearing into the night. He shouted after them, "Hey, if y'all really need some dark outsidery type shit to shape your life, look into Satanism. It's much healthier, yo." He clapped Bobby on the shoulder and steered him over to meet Sadie and Cray. "No one knows this place better than you, am I right?" Sadie asked him. "Do I know you from somewhere?" Bobby responded. "You came here before, didn't you?" Sadie shook her head, very slowly as to not unsettle her wig. "Have you opened the breach before, Bobby?" "No. I mean, kind of, but just a window, not a door." "Have you been trying to open a door, Bobby?" He looked up and then down. No, it ain't like that." Sadie leaned in close. Show me everything, okay? I need to see it, Bobby. I need to see it for myself." Manny put on his jacket and his gun, and they all followed Bobby back down below. Sadie fell behind the others. She slipped on gloves and took out a folding field dressing knife from the side of her boot. A door is opened once, it's never hard to open again. Just like these walls, the breach scabs over. But you can rip it open again, right, Bobby? Bobby shrugged. That's what they tell me. They entered the cavern and crossed towards the middle of the room. The ground here was covered in thick stains, dark and foreboding. As they approached, the room felt like it was starting to charge up. And that subsonic hum began to creep through their bones again. As long as one side is pushing and one side is pulling, it can open up just like that. Right, Bobby? Although, it does help to have some direction in your violence. It's like throwing them a direct line. For example, Sadie stepped up behind Bobby, the knife in her hand, and she dragged it across his face. The serrated blade shredded the corners of his lips and cut up through his meaty cheeks to the corners of his eyes. He shrieked. He clutched at his split face, showering the stones with hot blood. Your name is Bobby Gig. You worked for Miss Ambrose on the Flayed Lady. I read all about you. Now it's your turn to be the sacrifice, you sick son of a bitch. Bobby Gig, I offer you to the woman with the split mouth. The air in the middle of the room quivered and shimmied like noon on a Texas highway. The breach was cracking open. She stabbed Bobby in the face and yanked sideways, tearing the remains of a burst eyeball from the socket. I offer you to the surgeon, she hissed. Bobby hit the ground on his back. Oregon and Manny looked at one another, big time fucking concerned. With a firm, practiced hand and a sturdy cutting tool, Sadie severed Bobby's hand in less than 15 seconds. She threw it into the air behind her, over her shoulder like a pinch of salt. I offer you to the hand collector. The fresh and bloody hand flipped end over end, leaving a thin vapor trail of blood behind it, one that stayed in the air, hovering, bleeding out in all directions, extending tendrils that looked like cuts in the side of the world. The door was opening. Sadie put the knife away and drew her gun. I use the pain and suffering of your own emissary to summon you. I call forth the ghastly ones. She shot Bobby 3 times in the face. Something passed through the room. That underlying throb skipped a beat. Have you ever been in an old car and it shakes and grinds and vibrates like hell as you're revving up, and then you shift gears and just for one instant, just for 1 second, the vibrations stop and everything is perfectly still? That. Sadie stood over her sacrifice, astride it like the Colossus of Rhodes, and she screamed into the pulsing breach.
Well?
come on! There was a wound in the air, a few feet off the ground, colored in wisps and tatters of dingy gray and organ meat purple. It undulated, as if being pushed from the other side by ghastly hands. And then it started to heal over. And that noise, that awful noise, had become distant, weak. Sadie spat. "You fucking pussies!" She put her gun away. Manny tentatively raised his hand. Excuse me, but what was that? After all that bluster and huffing and puffing about not opening the breach, what the actual fuck was that? I didn't think they would come through, but I had to find out for sure. She stared at Oregon. "Mr. Cray, I don't know why, but for some reason it seems the ghastly ones are afraid of you. They kept the breach closed on their side because you were here. Do you know why that might be?" "Yeah, I do. You remember the long black veil?" Cray made a snapping motion with his hands, recreating how he had twisted her ghastly neck. "That was you?" Sadie said with a sly grin. He nodded. "Yeah. Now, you mind telling me how you know what you know?" "Of course. Certainly." She unfolded that dressing knife and popped a steel hook from the base of the hilt. "But this is sort of an object lesson. My words aren't going to do it justice. You have to see for yourself." And then she knelt down and started to saw through Bobby Gigg's bullet-cracked skull. "I understand that I look psychotic, but this isn't a person. This is an emissary." She used that hook to pull away chunks of bone and expose part of the brain pan. If you know the ghastly ones, then you know the place they call home. That island, the End of Days, is a real place. You can go there in your dreams, but you can physically go there in person. And when you do, you come back different. Like Bobby here. She slid a gloved hand into the meaty pulp of his brain tissue. She rooted around. "After that, you aren't a person anymore. They put a piece of themselves inside your head." Triumphantly, Sadie yanked her hand free, holding what appeared to be a wet, glistening brain tumor. Inky black, glittering green in the glimpses of dim light. She tossed it on the stone floor. After a moment, it started to slither slowly back towards the body. Manny and Oregon had been around the block more than once. They'd seen some shit. They'd done some shit. But this was some shit of an altogether new level for them. Cray knelt down, staring at the thing, watching it move. They don't like to be exposed, helpless. It's trying to find someplace warm and wet to hide, Sadie explained. She stood up, turning her back to the unsettling sight of the tumor crawling up the side of Bobby's split cheek. It disappeared back into the soup of gray matter that ran out of the side of his shattered head like the innards of a half-scooped jack-o'-lantern. "You asked how I know," Sadie said. She stripped off her gloves. She pulled off her surgical mask, tossing all aside. "This part is hard for me, boys. But I think I'm very good at reading people, and everything I know about you says that you are good people. I called you here not just because you're a random security team, but I needed you here because I needed to see if you were useful. And you surely fucking are. So now, I need you to trust me, and I need to trust you. Because what comes next is a big fucking ask. So here goes." Sadie pulled off her wig. The sutures and scars had all healed, but her scalp was a twisted grid of pink and white tissue. Little wispy patches of hair only served to highlight the odd angles and creases where the DRO's men had put her skull back together again. I had one of those things in me. That's what all of this is. The DRO used me as a guinea pig to see what would happen. I wasn't the only one, but I was the only one who lived. And it's gone from my brain, but it's not gone from my mind. Cray nodded. He knew the difference. I still know things. I can sense them. I could feel it from Bobby here. And I remember things, not full memories. The emissaries don't work like that. I get flashes, bits of memories, names, pieces from the collective. And that's why I called you, Oregon. I remembered your name because the ghastly ones all know your name. They don't just know you, they fear you. They fear you so much that I just gave them an open door and they held it shut from their side. It's an island full of demonic boogeymen, and you, Oregon Cray, are their boogeyman. This is just the kind of man that I need on my team. Join me, join us. We're fighting a war against them. Cray looked at Manny. Sadie put her wig back on. This is good versus evil, boys. Am I straight? Oregon reached out and gently tugged a lock at her temple to straighten her wig. Thank you. Miss Ambrose would like to put you both on retainer. You would be working with me and for me personally. She looked at her watch. Okay, the tech team should be here by now. We have a sort of security fence we can put up in here. And that means your work starts now. Why don't you just blow it up? Collapse the whole thing. You never know. It may come in useful someday. She left the brain slug and its host for the tech crew to bag and dispose of while they installed the little black boxes which would serve to contain the breach and keep emissaries out of the cavern once and for all. Manny said, "So, does this mean you're going to tell us why the charity lady has a crew of mercenaries hunting demons and shit? Because I've seen her on TV for that telethon, and I gotta say, none of this fits her profile." "Are you in?" Sadie asked. The two men looked at one another. "Yeah, we're in." "Okay, then I'll tell you all about Miss Ambrose. But it's a long story. I'll tell you on the plane." They stepped out of the cave and into a group of people wearing biohazard gear and a wash of bright white light. Thank you for listening to another episode of Scary Home Companion. Find the show on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, or you can contact the show directly by emailing us at scaryhomecompanion@gmail.com. Always love to hear from the listeners. Sadie Jane, Oregon Cray, and Manny Cortez have been regular fixtures on this show for a couple of years now. Finally, we have learned how they came together in the first place. For more of this trio, check out the Gunny Sack Races and Apex Predators, among others. Join the Patreon. On the show Patreon, you can find a full list of all the show characters from all 110 plus episodes, and a listing of all the episodes in which these characters have appeared. You also get a timeline, insights into the mythology behind the show, and best of all, bonus extra episodes never to be released anywhere else. The Vespers, Apex Predators Aftermath, also with Sadie, Cortez, and Cray. Death Rides, Part 1 and 2. Cruise Ship Carnage. And the latest bonus episode, The Psychology of the Ghastly Ones. This episode was edited and produced by Jeff Davidson. Features music by Mountain Cult with Untitled 2. Patrick Kilpatrick, Scratch and Scab. First Rebirth with Prisoner of Infinity, and Jay Surak. For the third straight episode, we used his song, Gates Open, and I'm still not tired of it. We could play it in 10 more episodes. And, as always, Chelsea Oxendine with the theme music.